What is up, Pauper players? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. This week we have a special double feature. Yesterday we posted our top 10. You can see that up in the card over there. If you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and check that out, because today we're going to follow that up with our honorable mention list for the brand new cards coming to the Pauper format from Murders of Karlov Manor. Mayo, of course, will be joining me. Let's jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and start us off here, Josh, with Makeshift Binding. This is a 3-mana enchantment for 2 and a white. You have enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Makeshift Binding leaves the battlefield, and then you gain 2 life. This is one mana more expensive Journey to Nowhere, but you gain 2 life. This I don't expect to see a ton of play, but it is worth mentioning that it is slightly better than the other options we have had up until now, besides exactly Journey. So for me, at least, this might be Journey number 5 and 6 in decks that really need additional removal, but much of White's removal is pretty subpar at the moment, so it's basically just Journey to Nowhere. So I can absolutely imagine a world in which this makes the cut as like a 1 or 2 of in the main decks of some decks that just need some extra journeys. Certainly a reasonable card, and the gain 2 life isn't nothing. So we take the incident of the life gain when we can get it. Next
Agreed.
is Make Your Move. This is another white card. This is a 3-mana white card as well, but it's 2 and a white at instant, and it destroys target artifact, enchantment, or creature with power 4 or greater. Josh, what do you think about this one, real quick?
I like this card, but we spoke about it a little bit beforehand, and it doesn't seem to be doing enough of it, of everything it needs to. Like I think that the card itself should have a choose 2. It could even be stretched to
so
choose 2. You can choose the same mode more than once.
Ugh.
I think that would make this
Absolutely not.
still not as good as Dust to Dust for artifacts, but a lot better for creature removal and hitting an enchantment. And
It'd be a single white pip instant speed Dust to Dust. It's probably pretty good. But yeah, I'm pretty low on this card. I think that for white artifact removal right now, it pretty much has to have the word exile on it. Destroy is like indestructible is just too good right now. Recursion is too good right now. It's pretty prevalent in both kind of forms, and you really just have to be exiling the artifacts that you're targeting with this card to get around the bridges and to get around things like blood fountains and things that are going to be recurring those artifacts. So if you want artifact hate, it pretty much has to be exile, which is exactly Dust to Dust or what's it called? Revoke Existence. Thank you. And then as far as like enchantment or power 4 or greater, I mean, we have Destroy Evil, which is this but 1 less mana and still an instant. As well as if you want artifact removal, a lot of decks in white are already running incidental enchantment removal through Dawnbringer Clerics. So I mean, it just feels like a lot of what this card wants to do is done better by other things that are also usually cheaper or more impactful, kind of all at the same time. So I'm pretty low on this card. I wouldn't be surprised if it sees some amount of fringe play. There is something to be said, as you mentioned earlier when we were discussing it, about the kind of compaction of roles, the ability to just put more options on each card. The power of these modal spells is that it really tends to up your like available sideboard slots, where you can deal with more decks through smaller card investments because the cards do more things. In this case, I don't really subscribe to that. I think that you're still going to need things that deal with bridges. You're still going to need things that exile. And then on top of that, if you're running this card, it's probably not going to save you any sideboard slots. But as a 3-mana instant, it is a lot of modes, is a lot of available targets. It will probably always have something that it can kill in any given matchup. So for that reason, it'll probably see some play. I guess we'll have to wait to see how things shake out as to whether or not this makes the cut. But if you are looking for cards to grab to make sure you've got your, Pauper Playables box ready to go for MKM release. You might as well snag 4 of these. They're not going to be much.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Reasonable Doubt. This is a 2-mana instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Suspect up to 1 target creature. Suspect is a brand new keyword for Murder at Karlov Manor, and a suspected creature has menace and can't block. And when you suspect a creature, you just select a creature. It doesn't have to be a creature you control, and it has menace and can't block until it becomes unsuspected. Right, I don't believe suspecting another creature removes suspicion on a creature that is a suspect already. I'll have to look at the actual rules of suspect. There's a couple of like subtle interactions there with cards that remove suspicion, so I'll have to confirm on that one. But overall, I think this is kind of a weird one. It's a counterspell, but it can all of a sudden remove a blocker from your opponent or give your own ninja like menace to sneak something through, or give a fairy menace so that you can ninjutsu something in. Really interesting card. It kind of does a lot for 2 mana at instant speed. Obviously, you need a spell to target in order to cast it. That's going to be your main hurdle, is that if this is popular, people are going to be aware of it and are going to play around it. That being said, I don't expect it to be super popular. Certainly is no counterspell or spell stutter sprite, but as a 2-of, maybe for like blue-black terror or scred terror, like red-blue, making your, giving your Tolarian Terror or your Cryptic Serpent menace is certainly pretty strong, or removing an opponent's blocker to beat through with your Tolarian Terror or something like that can do a lot of work. So, as a less efficient counterspell with some offensive and defense implications, really interesting spell. Didn't expect to see a counterspell with like offensive capability on it, but here we are. Super interesting. I'm interested in testing it. What do you think?
Yeah, I enjoy this card as well. I think it's a nice way to sneak through some extra ninja damage to draw another card there. But outside of that, you hit everything on this one.
Sweet. Next up we have Seasoned Consultant. Seasoned Consultant is a 1/3 human detective for 1 and a white. And whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, Seasoned Consultant gets +2/+0. So it becomes a 3/3 when it attacks with 3 or more creatures. It does count itself. It's not other creatures, so it just needs 2 buddies. Similar to what is it? First Street Legionnaire.
First Street Legionnaire's got first strike on your turn, doesn't he? Or is that? Oh no, you know what? You might be correct.
I think it's First Street Legionnaire. The recently downshifted from Ravnica Remastered is a 1/1 for 1 that when it attacks with 2 or more creatures, it gets +2/+2 and becomes a 3/3. It is also crucially a human. I'll let you talk about why that's relevant, because it is a pretty cool idea, and I'm interested to see if anybody can pull it off. But why is this card here, Josh? What gave it its spot in the honorable mentions list?
It is a human. So there's this very specific card that came out recently that some people may or may not be brewing around, that maybe have had a keyword on it that they liked, and that's Rally at the Hornburg. Seasoned Consultant into Rally at the Hornburg just lets you swing for 5 out of nowhere. It's a good extra way to squeeze in some human-based combat damage. It's excellently offensively costed. It reminds me a lot of, there's another card, Grand Ball Guest, came out in the last set. It's got a similar stat line after casting Rally at the Hornburg, and it's another 3 power creature you're going to be swinging with.
So for those who don't know, Rally at the Hornburg, 2 mana sorcery from Tales of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings set. It is a red and a colorless for a sorcery that makes 2 1/1 human soldier tokens and then gives all humans haste. So the human creature type is a little bit relevant here. Same with the Legionnaire. Giving them all haste can open the door to some very wide swings very quickly. So that's what Josh means by attacking for 5 out of nowhere. That being said, I don't think it scales as well as something like Goblin Bushwhacker in the red deck, just because there is no like easy way to pump your board. Things like Guardian's Pledge only pump red creature or only pump white creatures. Now that being said, the soldiers from Rally at the Hornburg, although it is a red spell, are white soldiers. So perhaps there is a world in which you could make a white matters human deck around like Guardian's Pledge, using Rally at the Hornburg to give your creatures haste and to go really wide out of kind of an empty board and swing for big numbers there. That also kind of opens the door to maybe running things like Battle Screech Prismatic Strands for a little bit of graveyard value. Rafine's Informant is a human as well. Great white weenie card. So maybe there's some subsect of like the white weenie aggro deck that can run humans and Rally at the Hornburg. Really interesting idea. Let's see. Next up is Slice from the Shadows. This is a card a lot of people are very, very high on. I will do my best to explain why I am not. This is an X mana and a black instant. This spell cannot be countered, and it gives target creature -X/-X. So, what is good about this spell? The spell is good because it can't be countered. I mean, a lot of people are very high on that. Can't be countered is a really cool ability. I will concede that. I will say, however, that can't be countered matters most when it is a big mana spell. The reason that X spells in Pauper in general are not popular, things like Fireball, Incinerate, Caravex Torch a little bit less so because you can pay to make it harder to counter. And like Rolling Thunder aren't as popular because if they get counterspelled, you feel really, really bad. This, on the other hand, can't be counterspelled, so why isn't it great? You can tap out freely. The problem is just that. The answers in which you need to tap out to kill, things like Tolarian Terror or Myr Enforcer, are not worth the mana you are tapping to kill them, even though you are killing them safely. You are never paying 6 mana into this to kill a Tolarian Terror through Ward 2. You're just going to play a Tithing Blade. You are never paying 5 mana to kill a Myr Enforcer here that they're just going to get back or they played for free. You're never going to tap out to kill the creature your opponent just played and then pass the initiative back to them to play another creature. Consider also the fact that most of the creatures that we're discussing are costing the opponent to cast vastly less than they are costing you to answer. In the event that you are not tapping out to cast this spell, it is dealing, -2/-2, -3/-3 for 1 plus the amount of damage that it's doing or negative that it is doing. So it's always going to be overcosted for its effect, especially in the face of something like Last Gasp or we have 1 mana -2/-2s. We have 2 mana -3/-3s. There's just no world in which this is efficient enough to make it relevant. And even though it can't be countered, unfortunately, I just don't see this one making the cut in Pauper as it is now. Now, should something change in the future and things become a big control mirror meta where your opponent always has answers and it's just a threat value game back and forth, then this card can again rise to some playability. But currently, in as fast as the metagame is, in as efficient and as value-friendly as the metagame is, you just cannot afford to tap out to deal with a creature that your opponent only paid 1 to 3 mana for. Even if you know it's going to die, it's probably just going to come back, and you're losing mana in the exchange. So it's just not worth it. Josh, do you have any extra thoughts here? All right, I'm pretty opinionated on this one.
I mean, might be okay in Tron when you got a bunch of extra land, but no, you said pretty much most of it.
All right. Well, I'll let you take over the next one then. We're rounding down now. Only a couple cards left. Snarling Gorehound is the next one on the honorable mentions list. We have a 1/1 for 1 black. Is a dog. It has menace, and whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you surveil 1. Really interesting effect. Not something I think we've seen from anything else before. The power 2 or less is kind of a weird theme for something that presents as like either a self mill or like an aggro-y strategy where you're trying to like hit more gas. Um, it's strange to me that this doesn't have haste. I think the only other Gorehound I can think of has haste, so it's interesting that this doesn't. Um, what do you think of this card? What put it on the list?
That other Gorehound doesn't have menace either, does it?
I don't
Haste,
think
lifelink.
so. Mm-mm.
Yeah, these dogs, they're getting all the different abilities here.
Mm-hmm.
No, so
Must
it's
be a
a
different breed.
that's what it is. Uh, it's the 1/1 haste or 1/1 menace. Um, that part is not nearly as relevant as what I think the rest of it would be. In that, whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you surveil one.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit higher on this card because of the last set or the set before. There was a 1 mana 1/2 that whenever an enchantment entered, you could scry one. And that card
Mm.
did so much for getting that deck the card advantage or card
Mm-hmm.
selection that it
Slumbering keep
needed.
card, good card.
Yeah. And granted, it's a 1/2, and granted that card can also pump itself
Mm-hmm.
based on the number of other enchantments, so it's a lot more streamlined in what it's doing. I think that Snarling Gorehound has the capability of allowing you the card selection
Mm-hmm.
that's necessary, and also putting the cards again in the relevant zone of the graveyard if you need it to be.
Oh yeah, this card can certainly churn through some cards. I mean, it doesn't say non-token. It doesn't say once per turn. I mean, you can absolutely like Koldatha Rebirth and just like ensure that you are going to draw the card you want next turn. You can dig a long way with this card. Um, be really interesting to see if something comes of this card. As it is, I'm kind of confused. Like the card wants to be a 1-drop, it wants to be aggressive, but it doesn't have like a damage effect, it doesn't have haste. Um, it doesn't really want to do what black is doing right now. It's very controlling. Red is really the aggro color, and this doesn't really have an identity. It's not quite good enough that the red decks are going to splash black for this card. So I think this one might be up for adoption until a deck comes along where this thing finds a home. But very interesting card, very powerful effect. Certainly worth keeping on the radar and keeping in the back of your mind when you're building decks, just in case you find somewhere for this guy to go. Second to last here, the penultimate card, Gearbane Orangutan. This is a 3-mana ape. It's a 2/2 with reach for 2 and a red. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose one. You either destroy up to one target artifact, or you sacrifice an artifact. And if you do, put 2 1/1 counters on Gearbane Orangutan. Uh, so it is either a 3-mana 4/4 with reach and you like draw a card, or you destroy your opponent's artifact and it's a 2/2 with reach. Um, Modal card it destroys an artifact. It has reach. It can get bigger. It has 1/1 counters. I mean, certainly powerful enough to be on this list. Seems a little bit lackluster at 3 mana. Really wish they would have the balls to print a 2 mana effect like this. It could have been 2 mana and gets 1/1 counter, and it would have been significantly better than a 3 mana one that gets 4, or the 3 mana one that gets 2 counters. Um, really would have liked this to be continuing like the bargain card, the
Oops.
oof. Would have been nice to see this as like a red parallel to that card, um, where like it's just bargain, get a 1/1 counter, and then
I'm
it's a
just
two
happy it
two
doesn't
with
say
reach.
collect evidence. All right.
Right, fair enough. Yeah, really interesting card. Not quite powerful enough to make the top 10, but certainly something to keep an eye on. Like I said, artifacts are everywhere right now, so certainly a reasonable card. Do you have anything to add on this one before we wrap this up and see our last one?
No, I mean this card's interesting. I think it's one of the better ETB creatures with
Mm-hmm.
a destroy target artifact effect. Just because if your opponent doesn't have any targets that you can destroy, bridges,
Mm-hmm.
then the second ability is going to be helpful for you. in most cases. So it's not ever going to be just a, oh, hey, I had this creature and now it's dead, because it doesn't do
Sure.
its one specific thing
Mm-hmm.
that I needed it for. And it also has the reach, so it'll be okay against like fairies if
Mm-hmm.
you need it.
Well,
It's
and
a
this
little
is
slow for
also
fairies, but
like very specifically good with synthesizers. So maybe there's some other synthesizer deck that uses this. Um, something along those lines. I personally am not 100% sold on Gearbane Orangutan, but I can certainly see how it would be appealing, and if there's a home for it, it's probably pretty good. I just don't see a home for it yet. Last but not least, we have Public Thoroughfare. This is a new land to the Pauper format. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped, and you sacrifice it unless you tap an untapped artifact or a land you control, and then it can tap one of any color. We've seen several lands like this in the past, but none quite like this, and there's a very important distinction. Previously, lands like this would be sacrificed unless you paid one, which was essentially the equivalent of tapping a land. However, this also allows you to tap an untapped artifact, and this, like some of the cards before it, is in this list for one very specific deck. This is here for Fogtron, otherwise known as 4-color or Flickertron. That deck is running on something called Energy Refractor for its colored mana, but it uses it at a 2-to-1 conversion rate, and it uses a filter land currently, which limits its colored mana output. While it works, it's not as good as it could be. Sometimes it feels a little bit clunky. But the deck runs lots of artifacts that don't care if they're tapped. So being able to add this as a 2-of into the Flickertron mana base and have it tap an artifact that you don't necessarily care about and open consistent mana of any color to that deck without a mana loss is definitely a big boon, and it's a subtle enough change that I think it does make the card a bit more playable. So we'll see if Tron is able to put this one on the map. Any other closing thoughts here for Public Thoroughfare?
No, not really. I mean, outside of that, I don't see any other decks that would really appreciate this card unless they are
Agreed.
consistently running double different mana pips.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, but outside of that, it's interesting. I think it's a step
Sure.
towards
Mm-hmm.
being a more played common 1 mana of any color land.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see them playing around in the design space for what a common land can be in this set. We're definitely seeing some improvements to what have been long considered like design staples of the common power level. I think this is in part due to the play packs coming with Murder at Karlov Manor. We are no longer seeing draft boosters or collectors or set boosters. We have kind of unified those into a play booster, and they pledged better quality commons to eliminate the kind of draft chaff that so many packs were filled with. So we are supposed to see some significantly better commons to kind of fill out those packs. And I think they've done a pretty good job here. We've seen a lot of exciting commons, a lot of power creep coming through and really pushing the power level of the common design space. So really excited to see what comes next and what people end up doing with some of these new cards. So thank you so much, Josh, for hanging out and walking through these cards with me. Lots of cool stuff to talk about and a lot of cool new decks, or at least changes to existing decks with new cards that I think I'm excited to try out. So let us know down in the comments below if you think we missed any, or if there's a different card that maybe should have made this list. Let us know below. Thank you so much for sticking it out. As usual, guys, goodbye forever.